Bearers of the Word. Tasia. Within the Malina Reach system, a new and even more dire threat had risen. The Dark Apostle Erebus and his forces from the World Bearers Traitor Legion were causing great damage to the Imperial efforts to defend their region. The enemy was of a particular insidious nature, as the self-stylized prophet of the ruinous powers sought to convert the people of the Imperium as much as to slaughter them. Spreading his foul corruption far and wide, he had managed to manipulate the Ultramarines Honor Company into an attack upon the world of Tasia, the fourth planet in the Malins Reach system. The company hoped to draw Erebus to battle in the dark, methane-shrouded grooves of the planet's surface, but found that the Dark Apostle had instead drawn them into a trap. The World Bearers were far from Talisia by the time the Ultramarines arrived, who instead found a force of Eldar waiting for them at the site of one of those Xenos planets-bound webway transit portals to the warp. Upon making planetfall, Captain Ichion, the leader of the Honor Company, ordered his force to make ready for battle, but not to launch an assault upon the Xenos immediately. He had been advised by the Cadian High Command that the Eldar had on occasion aided Imperial forces, and though he knew well the duplicity of the Xenos, he nonetheless afforded them the opportunity to retire without the need for bloodshed. Unfortunately, the malicious Xenos were of a mind for war, and launched an unprovoked attack upon Ikion's forces. The battle that ensued was a prolonged and vicious one, with running combats being fought through the dark, vitrified forests. Death would come by stealth for both sides, and both sustained terrible levels of casualties. In time, Ichion ordered his diminished forces to regroup at its drop zone for one last assault upon the duplicitous foe, but in doing so found the enemy's positions abandoned. Upon coming to the Eldar portal, Ikion's librarian, Lesrus, of the Sons of Gulliman, advised him that the Xenos had fled through their webway and were working to seal the portal from afar. Ichion washed his hands of the Eldar, determined never to give them the benefit of the doubt again, but due to the loss of so many of his brethren for such little gain. So it transpired that Erebus had not only skillfully maneuvered two of his foes into wasting precious time in futile combat against each other, but he had made use of the distraction of the launch to launch an attack elsewhere, upon the primary world of Malins Reach system. Malins Reach. The world of Malins Reach was subjected to hell over a period of 3 solar days and 3 nights. Warp storms flared into being around the planet, shrouding its 3 moons behind a sickly violent haze, quickly followed by waking nightmares which racked the population. Many took their own lives, so terrible were the visions of insanity made real, and many more roamed the streets enacting wanton acts of carnage and madness upon each other. On the 3rd night, the Word Bearers landing craft streaked from the tortured sky, securing a drop zone scant kilometers from the Ministerium district of the world's capital of Ruskin City. The defenders of Malins Reach could only offer scant resistance to the Traitor Marines' assault, as they were debilitated by the ordeal of so many solar hours of psychic torture. The Word Bearers fell on Ruskin's cathedral, committing such blasphemies that by imperial edict all loyal servants of the emperor were forbidden to recount them, save for high-ranked individuals. Through some unknown means, the Word Bearers were able to summon forth the creatures of the warp into the ruined cathedral, before returning to their dropcraft and departing. The imperial forces of Malins Reach were sorely pressed for many solar days containing the demonic incursion, and the creatures unleashed there were only banished when Captain Ikion's forces arrived in orbit and obliterated the entire site with an orbital bombardment. It was the commander of the Ultramarines Honor Company recounted, the only way to be sure. Though a great many of the Imperium's forces present on the world were lost in the barge, along with a great part of the capital city. It was considered a merciful end for them. As it says here, for them. Such a slaughter was the terrible price of protecting the emperor's domain from the remorseless demonic servants of the ruinous powers. War in the Webway. The Eldar Webway, the secret labyrinthian realm of the Eldar race, through which the length of the galaxy can be traversed in but a single step, was penetrated during the 13th Black Crusade by intruders bent on nothing less than the theft of its most dreadful secrets. Ahriman, amongst the greatest of chaos sorcerers, and the former chief librarian of the Thousand Suns Traitor Legion, has somehow gained access to the Webway. For millennia, this practitioner of the darkest of arts has sought this prize, and he intended to fathom the route through the Webway to the Black Library, the hidden craft world that was the repository of all the knowledge gained by the Eldar race over the millennia, over millions of Terran years on the subjects of chaos. The Black Library was a dark craft world that eternally traveled through the infinite corridors of the Webway. Its location and route through the Webway were numbered among the greatest secrets of the Eldar race, and were hidden from all but the Harlequins and the members of the Black Council, the governing body of the Black Library within the labyrinthian dimension. Like all craft worlds, the vessel was both sentient and psychoactive, hiding itself from all psychic probes, while simultaneously repelling warp entities and other physical intrusions. The Black Library is an enormous construct with a scorched crystalline appearance, covered in veins and flourishes, but with the typical flowing grace of Eldar architecture. The interior is an intentional maze comprised of all manner of convoluted passages, corridors, and chambers. Bubble vaults full of stasis caskets containing forbidden lore and dangerous artifacts hang from the superstructure, whilst inside and above are myriad citadels, obelisks, monoliths, and spires where the rest of the craft world's arcane contents are kept. Such was the desperation of the situation that these guardians took an active role in the defense of their realm. For the Webway itself twisted and split like a living thing wherever Ahriman and his followers tread. Rumors of war beasts the size of battleships bolstering Ahriman's forces had implications too terrifying to contemplate. In response to Ahriman's intrusion, the Eldar launched a massive counterattack, the force of which bellied their woefully low numbers. The activities of Ulthui's strike force increased beyond measure, and a desperate running battle was fought across the Webway and upon the surface of those worlds that harbored entrances to it. As a consequence, worlds within the Eye of Terror itself were fought over, as previously sealed entrances to the Webway were unsealed in the battle for dominance. Eidolon and Belial IV were two such worlds, Crone worlds, long ago lost to the Eldar race at the fall of their empire 10 millennia past, and now vital to the survival of their race. It was rumored that one of the immortal Phoenix Lords, none other than Magna Ra, the Harvester of Souls, led the Eldar forces across the Crone worlds of the Belial system, and the ancient Eldar artifacts were unearthed by the forces of the arch-enemy. War against the Cabalites. Defense of Ex-Lucan 7. With the numbers of attacks by Eldar raiders increasing alarmingly, the Adeptus Astartes Command Council deployed a number of Astarte forces tasked with a specific objective of challenging them. It appeared that these raids were actually being conducted by Dark Eldar, the twisted kin of the Xenos that resided on the craft worlds, and though the Imperial forces held the entire Eldar race in due contempt, it was this faction which they decided to target in an effort to teach them the lesson that the might of the Imperium, although slow to react, was impossible to avoid forever. Aid finally came from an unexpected quarter of the well-guarded forces of the Imperium in the form of the Dark Angels chapter of the Adeptus Astartes. The Dark Angels, who had pursued their own mysterious ends throughout the conflict, had finally extended their full cooperation in the effort, acting upon intelligence passed to the Cadian High Command by the Ordox Xenos, and relayed to the Dark Angels by Supreme Grand Master Azrael. 4 entire companies of the chapter and 3 of a number of its successor chapters, collectively known as Task Force Shadow Guard, stage upon the outlying Cadian sector mining world of X-Lucan 7. There, the Astartes task force lay in wait within the hollow mountains of the Kyrian range, every vehicle powered down in order to ambush a sizable Dark Eldar raiding force. Appearing out of nowhere through the webway portals, the Dark Eldar made an extensive use of the sadistic Xenos... Appearing out of nowhere through the webway portals, the Dark Eldar made an extensive use of... The sadistic Xenos wasted no time in launching their attack against the mining settlements of the Kyrian range. Task Force Shadow Guard revealed themselves and took the first raider force completely by surprise. Exploiting the momentum of victory, Task Force Shadow Guard executed a maneuver that smashed aside a second Xenos force. Unable to coordinate their assault in order to create a breakthrough in the Astartes lines, the Dark Eldar's raiders were annihilated in a devastating massacre. The result was an outstanding victory for the forces of the Imperium that taught the deviant Xenos a lesson that they would not soon forget. Xerxia, since we had to come to this, right? The Imperial campaign against the Dark Eldars, though nothing more than a distraction from the maelstrom of the despoiler's invasion, soon posted another victory. Another force of Dark Eldar raiders had been defeated, on this occasion by the Relictor's Space Marine chapter, upon the world of Xerxia. The Relictors had not formally acknowledged the command authority of Longan Grimnar, Grimnar's Adeptus Astartes Command Council, and appear to have launched this attack upon their own initiative, not as a response to Command Council directives. It was believed by the Cadian High Command that the Dark Eldar's raids simply attracted the chapter's attention, and the raiders paid for their crimes in blood. Xerxia was a well-garnished star system, and many of the Imperial forces present there witnessed the Relictor's assault. It was said that the chapter slaughtered 3 entire cabals, purging the system and hunting down every last Xenos before slaying them without mercy. The chapter's officers were said to bear arms of terrifying potency, swords able to spew cleansing flame, and axes that sucked the essence of the Emperor's foe from within their bodies, leaving nothing behind but a dried husk. The chapter marched under arcane banners and icons of tangible power, the followers of their enemies scattering before them. The Relictors delivered the Emperor's wrath wherever they passed. A number of Imperial Guard officers on the ground at Xerxia attempted to contact the Relictor's chapter master, Commander Artecus Bardane, but the chapter master refused to acknowledge their communications. Subsequent to this action, the Relictors appeared in a number of other campaigns before arriving in the Cadia system. The chapter was known to have participated in an attack against the warband of the Word-Bearers Traitor Legion on the world of Subiaco Diablo, during which an inquisitorial task force disappeared under suspicious circumstances. They were next seen in the Cadian sector, where they clashed with a Night Lord's force at Excelta Minor, before becoming embroiled in their suppression action against the Dark Eldar raiders at Xerxia. The chapter next appeared near Cadia itself. Upon their arrival in system, the Great Wolf, Logan Grimnar, issued orders that the chapter should reinforce the Imperial garrison of Cadia. Commander Bardane refused to acknowledge Grimnar's order, and his fleet departed the system, headed by best estimates for the agri-world of Fremas. Grimnar was furious that the Relictors had refused to submit to his command. In a fit of rage, Grimnar ordered his most elite wolf scouts to track down the Relictors and discover the true nature of their mission. Exactly what occurred on Fremas is a matter of some doubt, but a pack of wolf scouts dispatched by Logan Grimnar tracked the Relictors to the remote Diomedes archive, where the chapter appeared to have repulsed a chaos attack before turning upon the archive's defenders. None of the defenders were reported to have survived the assault, but Grimnar's men recovered partial video logs that suggest the Relictor's objective was the sealed stasis vault at the heart of the mountaintop fastness. The contents of this vault were known to but a handful of adeptus in the Imperium, most of whom resided on Terra. It's not adeptus, adepts, whatever. The Relictor's actions would later put them in conflict with both the Inquisition and later the High Lords of Terra, which put the future of their chapter in dire jeopardy. Preparations and counteroffensive. For long weeks, the Imperial Navy had been forced to fight a desperate holding action against the seemingly endless waves of Chaos vessels. But its battle fleets had finally been reinforced. An Imperial fleet the size of which had not been seen since the end of the Gothic War 8 standard centuries earlier had been dispatched from Siframundi and staged itself at Bellis Corona in preparation for a massive counteroffensive into the Cadian Gate. The arrival of this vast armada allowed those Imperial vessels that had been fighting continuously since the beginning of the invasion a brief respite. Severely depleted ships' companies were bolstered through indiscriminate press ganging. Didn't I read this at some point? I think I did. Okay. Something press ganging and hasty repairs and refits were undertaken for those vessels most in need of them. I think they just copy-pasted this. The Imperial reinforcements were split into battle groups. Okay, the regions around the area encompassed. Lord Admiral Kuran, the commander of the Imperial Navy assets in Cadia system, has succeeded time and time again defeating Chaos war fleets, many times the size of his own, allowing reinforcements to enter the fray around the fortress worlds of Cadia system. At the same time, a massive influx of reinforcements and the Secellus system of the Cadia sector had penetrated the Chaos blockade of ships and minefields, and in the Bellicosa Corona system of the Bellis Corona sector, the entirety of the battle fleet Gothic has stormed into the fray. Infernal mines sworn across the battlefront accounted for the destruction of only a few vessels in the fleet. And now, Battlefleet Gothica had the opportunity to avenge the losses it had suffered in the Gothic War at the hands of Abbadon the Despoiler's own war fleet. If the relentless momentum of the invasion could be slowed for just a short time, then the defenders of the ground would have a real chance of victory. The Imperial Navy had gambled all on this sector-wide retaliation, and should it fail, then Battlefleet Obscurus would be so weakened that only the redeployment of fleets across the whole Imperium would not hold any hope of holding back the Despoiler's invasion. This one was a weird one, but let's move on. Wehrmacht Assault. Lord Castellan Creed soon ordered the redeployment of Imperial troops defending the feral world of Secellus to bolster the defenses there. Secellus was firmly under Imperial control following the defensive efforts of Lord Marshal Attica of the Imperial Guard and a number of Astartes forces. The problem had been the blockade which the arch-enemy's war fleets had placed around Secellus itself in order to prevent the Imperial forces from redeploying. To expedite the breakout, there was a planned push upon the enemy forces located near the mining world of Vermand. The Cadian Sector High Command hoped the vessels of the chaotic blockade fleet would be drawn off to oppose it. Simultaneously, a battle group upon the surface of Wehrmacht would launch a sudden frontal assault upon the enemy position, with the intention that the chaotic blockade fleet would be forced to ferry ground troops from Secellus to Wehrmacht, thus complicating their departure. This ruse ultimately proved too successful, and reminded Imperial commanders that the reactions of the servants of the ruinous powers could never be fully anticipated. The Wehrmacht assault was a complete success, and that it caught the enemy unawares. It appeared that the hordes of Chaos cultists, forming the Chaos presence upon Wehrmacht, were engaged in some form of mass ritual, the culmination of which was disrupted by Imperial forces' attack. The cultists were caught unprepared to defend their position, and were cut down with negligible losses to the Imperium's own forces. As anticipated, the enemy began to move troops upon the surface of Secellus up to orbit, and their war fleets waited for the troops' transfer to be completed before setting off to relieve Vermand. At this point, Lord Marshal Attica made his breakout from Seychellus, leading 40% of his force to their own transport ships, and running the gauntlet of the remainder of the chaotic fleet blockade. Though a number of his troops Though a number of his troop transport ships did not make it through the enemy lines, a great many did. Enough, in fact, to render that portion of the operation a success. Indeed, the Imperial Navy could not possibly have hoped that such a great number of chaos vessels would be pulled out of the line, for had more remained, Attica's breakout would have been far less of a success than it proved. However, 3 solar days later, the arch-enemy's reinforcements reached Vermand. So great were the number of chaotic troops ferried there that the Imperial forces stood next to no chance against them. History may never fully recount the sacrifices made at Vermand so that Attica's forces could reach Cadia. It appeared the Imperial forces had stirred up a veritable hornet's nest by interrupting the mass ritual there. But Imperial commanders could not help but wonder what evil might have transpired had they not acted. Xenos fleet activities. Eldar. The activities of the craft world Eldar against the force of chaos had ceased unexpectedly at this point in the conflict. For many solar weeks, the starships of the Eldar had been active across the Cadian sector, in most instances striking against the assets of the arch-enemy, though on occasion they had also attacked the Imperial forces for no discernible reason. Now it was as if they had simply disappeared. Entire staffs of Imperial savants, seers, and strategos had been assigned to the task of tracing the activities and objectives of the Eldar, and were in constant communication with the Ordo Xenos in this regard. Long-range scouts had caught brief glimpses of movement, but as the Cadian High Command had already learned, when the Eldar wished to remain hidden, there was little even their most skilled crews could do to find them. Progress was eventually made in determining the reason for the sudden disappearance of the Eldar fleets when an Imperial scout vessel managed to record traces of Eldar activity in system XT90304/G, an empty SAR system in the wilderness space, 30 light years to the galactic northeast of the Bellis Corona. On the outskirts of the system, the Imperial vessel picked up readings of a vessel of prodigious size and managed to execute a single pick capture before being detected. The pick capture confirmed just why the Eldar had redirected their efforts. The forces of Abbadon were in possession of a black stone fortress, an ancient Xenos-forged engine of destruction not seen since the end of the Gothic War. As if the presence of the planet killer in the sectors oculus of the segmentum obscurus were not dire enough a threat. Now the Imperium had to contend with this new threat. If the notoriously aloof and uncaring Eldar were prepared to throw the majority of their forces into combating the Blackstone Fortress, the threat they represented must have been terrible indeed. Orks. The Orks continued putting intolerable pressure on a number of worlds in the Scarus sector, notably Letid II and Mordax Prime. The Magi Biologus of the Adeptus Mechanicus believed that these foul creatures to be working alongside Abbadon the Despoiler to further their own ends, though they did not consider it to be a true alliance as such. More likely, the Orks were taking advantage of the opportunity provided by the Despoiler's invasion to launch new attacks against distracted Imperial targets. The situation on these worlds was grim indeed. In particular, Mordax Prime could not be allowed to fall into greenskin hands, for it was a forge world of prodigious output, and its loss would damage the Imperium's war effort. More to the point, the Imperial forces dreaded the monstrosities the Orks might turn the production lines of Mordax Prime to creating. 15 Imperial Guard army groups and 5 legions of cybernetic Mechanicus Skitari troops continued to hold Mordax Prime. Yet clearly such a large body of men was insufficient to stem the green tide engulfing the Forge world. The Segmentum Obscurus High Command drew up plans to send a further 34 to 40 regiments of Imperial Guard to the world, drawn from the regional reserve to help bolster Mordax Prime's defenses. Yet the orks had set their sights upon capturing Mordax Prime, broadcasting their designs for the planet they referred to as Mordaka Prime. That's just genius. On every Imperial channel, were not for the fact that Mordax Prime was the sovereign preserve of the Adeptus Mechanicus, Imperial High Command seriously considered petitioning the Inquisition for an exterminatus against the world before its vast resources fell to the enemy. The tides of war. By this point in the conflict, on every world of the Cadian system, there was only war. Vigilantum was all but lost to the unholy servants of the ruinous powers, though a small Imperial rearguard, previously thought annihilated, held out, stubbornly defending the naval attack Logis facility. Solar Maritus, too, was sorely pressed by the hordes of the despoiler, and the Cadian Sector High Command had ordered the world reinforced, lest its output of munition and other material essential to the ongoing war effort be lost. A blow the Beligard Imperial defenders could ill afford. With Imperial Navy reinforcements inbound, the defenders of Cadia had to hold out just a little while longer. Creed had been hailed by many as the most able Imperial Guard commander since the legendary Lord Solar Macarius. Yet many Imperial observers noted that his sub-commanders had not proved themselves quite so capable. So sudden and mobile had Abbadon's invasion proved that many Imperial commanders at the star system and planetary level had simply been unable to coordinate their actions, and were reacting to the enemy's attacks rather than dictating their own terms of battle. Creed had issued stern orders to his subordinates to take the initiative at the planetary level or fall to the enemy, for the choice was that simple. Though the archenemy had gained temporary advantage over Imperial forces at Vermont, the Imperium was now firmly in control of Seychelles. A number of cross-substantiated astropathic communications confirmed that the situation on that feral world was positive. Creed ordered a further 20 Imperial Guard regiments from Seychelles to be made, ready for transit to other Cadian sector war zones, an order that would be executed if and when the warp storm scarring the sector abated. But after long solar days of silence from across the Cadian sector, a single message managed to penetrate the ether. The Scarus sector fared ill, and its Imperial defenders begged that the Cadian High Command dispatch reinforcements with all haste. Only the industrial hive world of Thracian Prime stood before the tide of the Orc menace and the chaos filth assaulting the sector, and with each passing solar day, another world in the Scarus sector slipped further from the Imperium's grasp. It appeared that Bellis Corona was suffering at the hands of the arch-enemy, and even the Imperial Navy was having a difficult time of it in this region. Elsewhere, the Imperial Navy battle group Eclipse managed to halt the predation of an inbound Dark Eldar fleet. Despite being severely outmatched, the Imperial Navy's vessels managed to cause the catastrophic damage on the weakling ship of the Dark Eldar, many brave crewmen giving their lives in this process. The Xenos evidently employ some manner of cloaking device, for at first the battle group believed them to be a previously unknown Chaos Warfleet. That they were able to defeat this attack was cause for great celebration, but the Imperial Navy knew it had to increase its vigilance tenfold against further incursion. Fall of Ibrium. Abbadon soon unleashed a new and calamitous phase in his invasion. One of his allies, the infamous iconoclast and blasphemer Erebus, the dark apostate of the World-Bearers, the Traitor Legion, had unleashed the foulest of forbidden sorceries upon the loyal subjects of the God Emperor of mankind. Upon the world of Ibrium, a shrine world of the Ecclesiarchy, the dark apostate had ordered the building of immense cathedrals dedicated to the dark powers of the warp. That these monstrosities existed upon such a formerly sacred world was a profanity beyond words, but according to Imperial intelligence reports, they were constructed at the expense of 1,000,000 souls promised to the Emperor. Upon the completion of these dark monuments, Erebus ordered the ritual execution of every last innocent who still drew breath on the planet at the completion of their labors. The Dark Apostate's sins did not end at genocide. The rites by which the people of Ibrium were sacrificed drew forth the full fury of the Imperium, unleashing its anger upon the domains of mankind. Seething warp storms that threatened to cut the Cadian system off entirely from the outside racked Imperial space lanes, and the Eye of Terror probed with a malevolent purpose. The raw stuff of the warp had been unleashed, pouring through the rents in the thin skin of reality created by the World-Bearer's incantation, and calling up vast warp storms across the region. Many outlying worlds of the Segmentum, such as the Secellus and Caliban, were now engulfed in raging tempests, some simply cut off from aid, others reduced to shifting realms of madness, as the denizens of the Imperium ran riot across entire worlds. Ibrium was amongst the worst affected worlds, where the once proud ecclesiarchy cathedral had stood. Now blasphemous monuments to the powers of the warp claimed the domain of chaos. Across the Cadian sector, where kilometer-high hive cities had once pierced the clouds, now gargantuan carnal houses dominated worlds forever lost to mankind. Soon, astropathic communications from vessels caught in the flaring of the Eye of Terror, and at least 3 warp storms in the immediate region, led the Cadian High Command to conclude that Erebus intended to isolate the Imperial forces by making warp travel all but impossible. To a certain degree, Erebus had succeeded, though the Imperial forces were still able to remain in contact with the majority of their commands by way of astropathic relay. The warp storms continued to grow more and more intense with each passing solar day, and the Cadian sector High Command's command and control capability was stretched to the limit. Contact was lost with the entire worlds, armies and fleets, and unfortunately, the High Command was forced to rely upon increasingly compromised astropathic communications for each scrap of information that could be gathered about the overall situation.